Good afternoon, Kerin, and good afternoon, everybody watching. Today, we are going to talk about the Fife rental property market, but more importantly, we're going to look at the five-year overview and the outlook for landlords in 2025.
Yeah, we've seen a big change over the last 5 years anyway. That pandemic certainly made a dent on the market.
It is, and we're going to try and delve into that as much as we can today. So we'll roll the VT and get stuck in. Yeah, so the past 5 years, I mean, we've seen quite a lot of changes, Kerin, and the rental market has really experienced a significant growth in rents in particular, and I think that's something that tenants and landlords both will agree with me on. Now, the average rent has increased from back in 2020, which was £656 on average, to £1,070 in 2025. Now, that represents a 63% rise, which is quite a hike in 5 years' time. But there's been a lot of things that have influenced that. And we've got a lot of stats and statistics that we're going to go through today, and a few charts to try and visually help people through that. Because do you know what? It's sometimes difficult when we just sit and talk a lot of numbers. It's very confusing, and I'm quite a visual learner, and I'm sure if anybody's watching, they'll appreciate the graphs, so we'll use them as well. Now, these local trends are quite interesting when you compare them with the national picture. So we think about obviously Fife on its own, but you do really need to compare it to the rest of the country, where the average monthly rents have increased from things like £1,331 in 2020 up to £1,803 in 2025. And that represents a rise of 35%. Now, regionally in Scotland, the rent rose from 760 to 1,175, which is 54% increase. So you need to think about it regionally and as the UK as a whole. Yet, as affordability tightens, some landlords who were maybe a bit too optimistic with their pricing, and we have seen it and had to kind of really have that
realistic expectations is what we've had to discuss.
But when they're at that, when they do have that too optimistic view on the pricing, they have then been forced to reduce their asking rents. Now, 24% of rental listings across the UK experienced price adjustments in 2025 alone. Now, that's quite a big amount, and that clearly demonstrates that there's been overpricing, optimism with the pricing, and then having to then realign to the reality of how the market is in your region and things as well. And tenants in Fife are now paying substantially more than what they did 5 years ago anyway. But there is that need to be a wee bit more realistic. I think things started to spiral a bit, although I think it's right that rents should have increased in the last few years because most of them hadn't for a long time. I think it's really important to be realistic. Sorry, you were going to say, Kerin, because I know you're obviously involved in the pricing of properties and things, and it is difficult when landlords don't have the right, aren't armed with the right information about the pricing structure for rentals at the moment.
Yeah, I think a lot of landlords still have that expectation that we are still in that 2022, 2023 boom market that we were in. And I mean, don't get me wrong, the market is still really buoyant. There's still a lot of tenants looking. The supply is still quite short for rental properties. However, it's still, people are just not prepared to pay the crazy prices that they were before. And we are seeing a lot more landlords having to have those conversations and be more realistic about their rental prices, because ultimately for what they might want to try that higher side, but it's like, are you prepared to lose maybe a few weeks worth of rent because your property is not set at the right price when you could have it on at the right price in the first place and get yourself the right tenant in? Yeah. So it is having to have those conversations.
Yeah, definitely. And I do feel that while rents have increased, the supply of rental properties in Fife over the last 5 years has definitely, gradually declined from what it was. And I've got some figures to actually back that up. But I've actually got the chart here, and I'll put the chart up, and we could talk through it. Could you see that clearly enough, Kerin?
Yep, you can see that there.
Yeah. So on this chart here, the red line is representing the actual number of rental homes, and you can see how that fluctuates, and I'll explain how that works. And then the yellow line actually shows the flow, the trend. And you can see the Fife, this is just for the Fife region, by the way. Fife averaged for new rental listings each month in 2020, averaged 199. And you can see there in 2020 at the beginning, it's kind of, it starts in January, takes a dip, which is a big dip. That big dip at the beginning there, that is, of course, lockdown and COVID and things. And then after we come out of that and back, things started to peak again. And that's in July, September. We did hit another bit of a lockdown, so it dipped again. So that's how, these are the actual numbers of how it goes up and down. And then by the time we got to 2021, the average new rental listings was around about 201, which, as you can see, is similar to what it was the year previous. Although we've peaked and troughed quite a lot. When you do it on average, it's only really 2 extra properties from the year before, which was, pandemic lockdown time. Into 2022, it continues to drop slightly, but not too much on the average scale, as it's 187 properties on average listed in Fife. And then the trend does start to decline as we go into 2023. 160 properties. We go into 2024, 158 properties on average, and then as we're in 2025, we're averaging about 166 properties. New rental property listings each month. So you can see that trend there. The yellow flow, it does obviously show quite a stable trend to begin with, and then as we've come into the 2024, 2025, we're losing the amount of stock, and you could see that there on that the yellow line. So I think that gives a good visual representation, but you can see the numbers there on average do stay fairly similar around the lockdown and post-pandemic time, and then obviously start to decline. But in the contrast, rental prices have went up. Now, you'll see there the seasonal trends are also notable. The times of years and things as well. Rental supply tends to peak in the late spring, and then early autumn. I mean, Kerin, you'll stand testament to August, September, and September's our busiest time of the year. Although arguably we could say that we are busy all year round with rentals for the most part, but these times definitely do peak. And October being the end of September into October being particularly strong, especially if you're working in like a student market and things as well. We don't predominantly, St Andrews area, yes, but while then the winter months, especially December, show the lowest levels. We do have that kind of wee rush before Christmas.
I was going to say we have that final Christmas push.
Yeah. I'll say little rush before Christmas. I say we, that's the Scottish term. Just for people listening, they're like, we. So yeah, but it does show lower levels in the winter months. This pattern was obviously disrupted during the pandemic, of course, but has since kind of resumed. It's normal, what times of year it peaks and trough, albeit with generally lower volumes than we've seen pre-pandemic. And that current imbalance of limited supply, high demand has really tightened the market a bit. And nationally, rental availability remains more than 25% below the pre-pandemic levels. And I mean, Kerin, this is something that we're seeing firsthand, but it's not always obvious to people that are involved in lettings, but not maybe at the forefront as much as what a letting agent is. So I think it's good to share this knowledge and these kind of stats and our experience of what has been happening throughout, especially the 5-year gap from 2020 to now. There has been so much changes, not just in how we operate and how the restrictions that we've had, but also the new implications of legislation and the changes in law around letting in Scotland have changed quite exponentially in a lot of cases. So it's not always as easy to navigate as it was previously, or easy to not adhere to the legislation as it was previously. Not for us as agents, I just mean that certain individuals would tend to just brush by things without taking it as serious as now you do have to.
And we see even the hike in mortgage rates that a lot of people experience as well. Obviously, that didn't have an effect on just people that are owning their own homes. It had an effect on buy-to-let mortgages as well for people that have them. So again, that's going to push the rents up. Not even the fact that we just have not enough rental properties for the amount of people that are looking, but the mortgage rates alone as well. The rents have to go up to make it viable for people to actually continue to have the properties.
Yeah. What about, like, I mean, obviously, people don't have to take our word for it. I mean, I know that a lot of agents in Fife are on the same page. Do you know about like tenant demand and things at the moment, Kerin? Tell us a wee bit about that.
Yeah, so in Fife, obviously, agents are continuing to report strong tenant demand through the frenzy seen in 2022 and 2023. It has calmed down somewhat, which is obviously what we're kind of touching on here. But listings are still attracting multiple inquiries, particularly due to the areas that are affordable or relative to nearby towns and cities. But low vacancy rates persist. While the supply and demand gap may be narrowing slightly, it does still remain significant. So, I mean, that's what we're seeing. We still have waiting lists for our properties, and typically as well, anything kind of under that £1,000 mark, they're going within a couple of weeks ideally for it. But I'd say anything over that £1,000 mark seems to have stuck a bit, which is again a complete flip from those like 2022, 2023. The ones that were your big high end ones that were sitting £1,000 plus were the ones that were going really quickly as well. But we've seen a bit of a change in that in the market in the last kind of since 2024, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. I've got actually, I was just going to say, probably relevant to what we're talking. So we're talking about tenant demand, strong tenant demand, and also the rise in rental prices. What you were saying about obviously things that then tend to hit over that £1,000 to £1,500 mark aren't performing as well as what they used to. And I have one here about the actual rental. Apologies. Yeah, so if you look at this one here, so this is the UK rental market, and it has it's the available properties, available rental properties, these the average rent. Now, this is obviously the UK as a whole, so it doesn't really apply to us particularly here in Fife, but it does. I would imagine it shows quite the same trend throughout the country if you were to break it down. Do you know, on the left-hand side, we've got starting from 50 up to 450,000 available properties, and you could run through right here. This takes us right back to January there, and then in January 17, 18, 19 up to 20, and it brings us right through 2025. And you can see the available houses through from January 17 to just about the end of 2021. About July, October there, we've got quite a high volume of available rental properties. And then as we hit into 2022, it starts to decline, and you can see that. But as the amount of available rental properties start to decline, the average rents then start to climb in contrast. So that's quite an interesting graph there, and I think it's quite good to show that, you know, where you're saying about the tenant demand, but there's a lack in supply. And that's what pushes these rental, as well as obviously the need for rental values to increase anyway, as I say, because hadn't happened for a lot of years, and the pandemic kind of pushed that. But the whole supply and demand thing, if there's less supply, the demand increases, and that obviously always pushes the rental value up as well. So you can see that clearly there on that graph. So I thought that was a good one to share, and it kind of backs up what you're saying about tenant demand and things as well.
Yeah, and obviously with supply, analysis are estimating that 50,000 more rental homes are needed nationwide each year to restore the pre-2020 availability. So that's a big number. Yeah, but until that gap closes, upward pressure on rents in areas like Fife is likely to continue. So while the scale of rent increases is expected to moderate compared to previous years, we are still forecasting a further 3 to 4% rental growth in 2025.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not. I mean, obviously, there is a silver lining to it. We're not going to say obviously it's all doom and gloom, but there is a really great need for more stock and available property, because we have such a high demand at the moment. But then people might say, but then you're saying obviously things that are £1,000 and over sometimes struggle and take a bit longer, but then that's probably the impact of affordability from people as well. So do you know that it's finding that balance? And like you say, the more mid-market properties, 2-3 bedroom houses, which range from £600-700 up to the £1,000 rent. I mean, we're renting them in sometimes record times still, because they're so sought after and they're in that affordable price bracket, and especially in comparison to what people are paying in terms of mortgage interest rates and things, because not only do they have to have the entry costs of a deposit and things to buy, they've also got the ongoing higher costs with the mortgage interest rates, and there's just so much more involved. Whereas you've got easy and affordable access and exit into the private rented sector, and you don't have you've got less responsibility for the property as such as a tenant. You do still have responsibilities, but the main maintenance and upkeep and things falls back to the landlord to take care of. And a lot of people, for the most part, I think now people use agents, and a lot of people prefer, if they've been long-time renters and things, they prefer to work with agents. They've got relationships with agents. I mean, we've got tenants, if some landlords decide to sell up and things, they'll come back to us and say, do you have anything so I can stay with you guys? Because they've been with us so long, and they have that relationship, and they feel comfortable and safe working with the agent that they've been with for so many years.
Yeah, it can be a lot more awkward for both landlords and tenants to have that direct contact. Sometimes if you do have situations like obviously maintenance repairs, or maybe your rent's going to be, there's something happens, your rent's going to be a week late, it can be a lot easier to speak to an agent who's obviously there to deal with that, as opposed to maybe having to speak directly to a landlord about it. So it can be a lot easier. And even just keeping up with the legislation, there's so many changes that keep happening. So it's best to, especially if you're a landlord that maybe has one property or even two, it is a full-time job. So are you putting the attention into that property that it maybe needs and keeping yourself as up to date as you need to be? Or would you rather just pay for somebody to look after it for you?
Yeah, if I wasn't a letting agent, then I maybe wouldn't realise until a letting agent explained to me what actually goes into it. We obviously do it, and it is a full-time job, and some most of the time. So I think if I was looking to be an investor out with a letting agent, my letting agent capacity, I'd probably get a letting agent to do it, because I know what goes into it all, and I know what goes in after hours and all the rest. There's a lot. Anyway, but yeah, you're right to talk about legislation and the things that the landlords have to think about, and that's what I'm going to move on and talk about, challenges and also opportunities that landlords, and particularly landlords here in Fife, could have. The outlook for landlords is a bit of a mix. There's some pressure, but there's also a lot of potential as well. While rents are obviously higher, as we've just demonstrated, and tenant demand does remain strong, which are all good things for landlords and investors, and when you're trying to rent property, there are a lot of rising costs that landlords are facing. There's also these evolving regulations and taxation changes, and just so much things for them to think about and keep on the ball and up to date with. Firstly, regulations and reform as well. Obviously, if you're in England and things and you're tuning in, the proposed changes to things like minimal EPC ratings have added a bit of pressure onto people. You're going to have that extra expense to try and bring these up to scratch. And if not, obviously, and you've spent so much, there are going to be exemptions and things, but you still initially have to have that outlay to try and get to your EPC banding of C, which is going to be the minimum. With nearly 1 and 2 landlords and many, surveyed areas expressing concern about the cost of improving their older properties. And we know firsthand, we've got a lot of landlords, because we're quite a semi-rural area, and we've got a lot of, we work with a lot of, farm cottages and things like that, rural areas. Some of these are just never going to make the cut.
Yeah, despite their best efforts as well.
Yeah, that's right, because we just recently done one, and there was just lots of stuff that got done, and it still didn't quite make it. Granted, that if they spend, obviously, like I say, X amount, they will get the exemption, but there's still that initial pressure and outlay and things to do that. And that's the thing that if you're a landlord, you need to be prepared for things like that and have a contingency and have a plan for the unforeseen, basically, because things that you maybe never thought about will crop up. And then I think just rising finance and management costs and things as well. Kerin, what about things like that?
So as we say, interest rates have hiked and driven buy-to-let mortgage rates from between 2 and 3% just after the pandemic to 5% or more by 2024. And again, this has been very obvious to anybody that has a mortgage, basically. However, the Bank of England's recent lowering of its base rates to its current level of 4.25% has not squeezed landlords' profit margins as much. However, inflation has also increased the cost of repairs and materials, and it's important as many landlords now spend around 50 of their rental incomes, like a fifth of their rental income on maintenance. So we've said this in multiple different shows that we've talked about. You should always have a safety net for maintenance aspects. You never know when something's going to come up, when the boiler's going to stop working, when when your gutters might need replaced. So you should always have that safety net there for any maintenance costs coming up.
Yeah, it's just good practice, definitely. And if you've got anybody that's giving you advice on letting or being an investor and things, this is something that they should be advising you of, to be, like I say, be prepared for the unknown and have that contingency plan. And it's just, like I say, it's smart and it's good practice as well. So yeah, there is some rise in finance and maintenance costs that you do have to be prepared for. And then
same with contractors as well. Obviously, like we say, the price of material alone, not even just a contractor's time, but their fuel for getting there, their insurance, their materials, their time, everything all gets factored in. So it does bring up the costs over time as well, just like anybody would. Everybody wants that pay rise, but the contractors are the same. They all kind of need that money coming in to support their business.
Yeah, definitely. And then, of course, there is pressures like taxation pressures and things as well. There's a lot of recent changes to mortgage interest relief and capital gains tax, and these have all, had an effect and reduced the profitability for a lot of landlords. And if we look back since kind of like 2017, higher rate taxpayers have been required to pay tax on rental income before deducting the interest, thereby reducing their net yield. So, adding this to the potential for further capital gains reforms and the administrative burden of, making tax, they're pushed to make tax digital and things as well. These pressures have already, contributed to a kind of exodus of a lot of landlords. I mean, we've seen a lot of landlords selling up here, and I'm very certain that's just the same trend throughout the rest of the country. And there is data and things that's been pulled together by 20EA as a data collecting platform, and it's indicated that in Q1 of 2025, 15.6% of homes listed for sale were previously rental properties, and that's went up about 9.8% from the previous year. So you could see that there's a trend there, and it definitely has this exodus of landlords. And there's a multitude of different reasons that's causing them to sell, but obviously these things that I've just run through there are definitely up there as some of the main reasons for doing so.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously as well, from a tenant side, we have tenants' expectations and their affordabilities.
Yeah.
So with living costs so high, tenants are expecting more from their homes. So this is including things like better insulation, like we've touched on already with the energy performance certificate ratings, faster broadband, more modern amenities. But rent arrears remain a concern. So with research from Denton House showing that 5 and 6% of UK tenants with self-managed landlords are in arrears, and just under 2% with managed properties. So you can see there, obviously, you're getting a better result with your arrears with you having a managing agent in place. You're less likely to be dealing with rent arrears if you have that, as we've kind of touched on, that safety, but not even a safety buffer, but just that buffer in between to be managing it, whereas it can be quite awkward for private landlords. or just maybe not managed well in the first place. So it's less likely to be in arrears there if you've got a managing agent in place. However, Fife landlords must now carefully balance rental increases with the long-term sustainability of their tenants. So, and this is something that we very much discuss with our landlords when we are bringing up rent increases, because if you have a good tenant, if you increase the rent too much, that's not going to be viable for them. You could be pushing them out the door, and it's, do you want to potentially lose that tenant, have a vacant period, have a new tenant to deal with? There could be teething issues. You could have fees incurred for obviously reletting your property. So is your rent increase going to be worth what you're wanting to put it up to? It's definitely something to factor in when you're thinking about that.
Yeah, definitely. And these are all things that, you know, could add pressure and a challenge to any landlord or investor. But as I say, there is silver lining. It's not all doom and gloom. It's not, you know, continual legislation and things that are holding you back. Although it may feel like that, there are a lot of opportunities for landlords. We talk about strong tenant demand. I mean, that's something that could really help you push things forward with your portfolio. Despite all these economic pressures, Fife continues to see really strong rental demand. Its affordability and good connectivity makes it really attractive for, you know, couples and families alike. You know, we've got good links into the cities. You know, Edinburgh, Dundee. We've got that semi-rural, you know, vibe. Although we've got some quite good built up towns, and, you know, sometimes I feel like there's quite a good mix of just everything you need, and you're in the right place. That might be a biased thing, but I do think if you look at it logically and look at the amenities and the transport links and things that are available and the quality and style of living that you could have while being so close to the Edinburgh city centre, it does really make sense.
And that's what we see as well with tenants that are, they've been in the cities and they are looking to move into Fife, and they're just amazed by how much more they get for their money being here. And like you say, we still have everything on the doorstep. You've got your transporter links, but we've also got gorgeous beaches and nice woodland areas, and you still have an array of nice restaurants, pubs, like everything's still there for you, but you're getting a lot cheaper for it. So we do have a really strong demand in the Fife area for rental properties.
And I think in most places throughout Fife, you could be in Dundee or Edinburgh city centre within the hour, more or less. I mean, give or take. But I mean, obviously, tenant demand is really good, and the area is really good. But I think it's important to always remember that, you know, properties will let quickly as long as they're in good condition. These are the ones that will go. But I mean, if you've got something that's finished really nice, done really well, up to scratch, up to code, it's presented well in the listing, gives that same feeling when you walk through the door for the viewing, then you will really experience a successful let with minimal voids.
Yeah, the better, obviously, the better you put out, the better you attract. So if you're putting out a nice property, like you say, that's all nicely done, you're going to attract a good quality tenant for it. If you're putting out something that's dated, it's tired, there's issues that are quite visible for it, you're not going to attract the best tenant, because somebody that is wanting to get their money's worth and pay that higher rent is not going to be as accepting of wear and tear, we'll say.
Yeah, and obviously then these rises in rents and things have given that improvement on yields, and the rising rents really have lifted yields, and they're at their highest point than they have been in about a decade. So for those landlords without mortgages, or possibly have really low debt, their increased rental income, do you know, it directly boosts their profitability in their portfolio. And even though landlords with mortgages can maintain that healthy margin, if rental prices do remain strong, even though maybe their mortgage rates have went up and their mortgage payments are higher, if they could reflect that in the rent while still being reasonable, if you find that balance, you could have a really profitable, and your yields can improve despite having higher outgoings. What about competition?
So as some Fife landlords are exiting the sector, those who stay are benefiting from less competition. The expansion of existing landlords' portfolios, along with a fresh new wave of motivated landlords, mean that new investment opportunities exist. And I mean, we've seen this. We've had a lot of new investors that have come on, and they're keen to start their portfolio, and they're maybe in their late 20s, early 30s, and this is just the start of their journey. But obviously it's becoming, I think for people around about that kind of age, it is quite a motivational thing that you can see. Obviously just the investment in like Instagram and all your social media, it is quite, you see how popular it is for people in their late 20s, early 30s, kind of getting stuck into it, which is great because it's making more rental.
Right.
Yeah, as long as you do it right. There's lots of ways you can do it wrong, but if you listen to the right people, you can do it right. But it is, and it's making it, because they are speaking to, I mean, we've got ones that we've been dealing with, and it's great to see how profitable their portfolio is turning out to be because they're taking the right advice. And again, it's the nice properties that they're putting out, so getting nice tenants there. But so it's good to see that new wave of investors coming in for it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are a Fife landlord, we can consult our existing landlord database to see if any portfolios could be purchased at a fair price with existing tenants in the properties. So obviously we do have some landlords that are maybe at the end of their journey that are wanting to exit and have built up that portfolio. So there is the possibilities in there for new landlords to be able to capitalize on these opportunities that
and pick up, especially when, I mean, there's a couple that I'm dealing with now that that have got tenants in it, and we are trying to then obviously sell that on, keep the tenant, and pass that on to a new investor. So I mean, if that could happen, it keeps the tenant in place, I think, which is important as well, because we've seen, and I'd imagine a lot of agents have seen over the last couple of years, tenants that have had to be moved on, and sometimes we've not been able to rehouse them, and then it's a shame because it leaves them a bit displaced. Are they joining the endless council and social housing lists, or the never-ending homeless list? And so I would rather always keep tenants in place, keep the property, and then pass it on to somebody else who's going to pick it up. But it doesn't always work out like that.
The worst case, if we do have a good tenant, and we do obviously try and help them find that next property if their landlord is going to be selling up and maybe it's not quite right for another investor, but if they do want to put it on the social market. But it's good that when you do have those tenants, we want to keep a hold of them, so we do our best to try and find them something else that is going to be suitable for them.
Yeah, good tenants are definitely something that you want to keep.
Yes.
So just before we round up today, actually, I want to share this one with you. And I think just as we talk about rental prices, and I think if you're a tenant and you all have noticed, and you've moved recently, you'll notice about the change in rental prices. And that people might think, that they're quite exponentially high. Now, I don't know, could you see that clear enough, Kerin? Yeah?
A little bit small, but I'm sure we can get the gist.
I think on your screen it might be, but when it's on the viewer screen, it'll be fine. But I'll talk you through it anyway for what it shows. And what it does show is it takes us back. So we have, this covers the whole of the UK. And I think it was quite good to bring this up because we could look at Scotland in comparison to the rest of the country in terms of the rental, the average monthly rentals. And this takes us right back to 2016, which is... And each column there is broken down into red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, grey and black, I think there. So we start at the red, and the red one is East Midlands, and then it runs right through East Anglia, Inner London, the North East, and it shows the rental values for each of these regions in each year, and you could see Scotland is quite low in comparison to the rest of the countries there, the rest of the regions in the country and throughout the UK. So I think in comparison, it's not very high in comparison. I mean, look at London. Inner London is just crazy. I mean, back in 2016 was the red one. It was the average was £2,492. Was the average monthly rent, and it's now up to £3,093. And if you look in comparison to Scotland, back in 2016 we were £760, and now we're up. Now the average rent it's saying now, obviously in 2025, is £1,175. That I would take into consideration that pulls in areas like St Andrews, and on that northeast tip of Fife, which is the Crail and these areas, and Anstruther and these areas of the East Neuk, where rental prices obviously are higher. These influence the average. So when you come back to areas like Glenrothes and Kirkcaldy and even Cooper, and leave-in are still quite affordable, and in some cases very affordable, especially at this mid-market, the mid-market range. So you could see the differences there, and hopefully you could see it clear enough. But I just thought I'd demonstrate that, Fife in comparison to the rest of the country is not grossly overpriced. And as I say, the average might be sitting at 1,175 for 2025, but that is definitely not the average for the majority of the residential family orientated areas. These are a lot lower and in that mid-market range where, as we spoke about, Kerin, somewhere from £600-700 up to about £1,000, which in the grand scheme of things is classed as affordable today.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think that was quite a good rundown. And I think it's good to look back. I mean, in some cases there, those graphs went back further than 5 years, but the 5-year change, I think, from lockdown and the pandemic and how things just flipped on their head and changed quite a lot and changed the market quite a lot. It's good to have a look at see how things have changed, but we could definitely see that trend of the available properties for rent declining. Rents are increasing, but there's still a lot of opportunities out there for landlords despite the added pressures of legislation and things that come with that. And to conclude, that the Fife rental market, like I say, does present a lot of challenges, but it also really does present a lot of opportunities. And landlords that are willing to navigate and that challenge for the changing landscape and invest in quality and adapt and evolve with the tenants' expectations, they can still really find a profitable and quite a resilient investment portfolio, and they could build that quite well. And as you say, Kerin, we've got a few that at the moment and over the last few years that we've been working with, and that's exactly what they're doing. And you could see that actually, we have happy tenants, happy landlord, and that's ultimately what you want.
Yeah, that is the end goal.
Yeah, definitely. So whether you're you're a self-managing landlord, or you're a landlord who uses an agent, not even particularly ourselves, if you would like to possibly pick my brain or Kerin's brain about what we'll be talking about today, some of those figures and how these trends and the best way to try and deal with some of the challenges, then feel free to drop us a message, jump in the comments. You can indeed come direct to us as well. On our social medias or whatever as well. And I think my email address will be in here. It's richard.cook@fifeproperties.co.uk. And yeah, these are our thoughts, and obviously those are the stats. They're not made up by us then. So they are the stats for not just Fife, but the whole of the UK. So I think they're a very interesting outlook. And if there's anything possibly that I've overlooked, I would be happy to hear from anyone. And we'll leave it. Everybody watching found that useful and interesting.
Yeah, definitely some good pointers in there.
Yeah, okay. Right, we'll leave it there today. Thanks, Kerin, and thanks to everyone who's watching. As I say, if it's a rerun that you're watching because we're live this afternoon, still jump in the comments. We could come back to you if you've got any questions. Okay.
Goodbye.
Right, Kerin. Bye.